Hey guys, it's DC, and welcome to the Soap Sanctuary, where all soap lovers are welcome. Guys, as promised, I got here our special guest, General Hospital Director Phideaux Xavier. Welcome, Phideaux, to the Sanctuary. How you doing?
Hey, DC, thank you.
Now, Phideaux, I know that you're coming off of kind of like the high of the daytime Emmy win that you just recently had. Even though it's not your first show on the rodeo, getting a daytime Emmy win, how does it feel?
It feels great. It's always exciting to win. I mean, all the shows do incredible work. We make 250 episodes a year, and so it's a lot of hard work. So to have that one night where we can get singled out and maybe get some accolades from our comrades is always wonderful. I definitely have been on the receiving end of losing, and I've been on the receiving end of winning. This year was great because I really felt strongly about the episode we submitted, which was the Nancy Lee Grahn Alexis episode.
Right.
And so that was, a pleasure because it was a story that speaks to, I think, so many people's emotions.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing I always think about is because we're always hearing about, even on soaps, how hectic it is for the actors. They have these long, like almost like 12-hour days. What is it like as a director? How hectic do those days look like for you on set?
Well, you come in at 6:30 in the morning and you walk through the set,
Oof.
and then the actors arrive for rehearsal at 7 a.m. I would have been studying my script the night before just to remember everything that I planned. We would have had a meeting the day before about all the unusual things that we would be encountering in the next day. Does someone have to get drenched with water? Is someone going to fall off the parapet? Does someone, have to talk to the horse? There's always so many details that you have to think about ahead of time before you go in and shoot the episode. So it's nerve wracking and kind of daunting, but at the same time, once 7 a.m. hits and we start rehearsing, I'm in my book. I'm just looking at what we're planning to do. I'm listening to the actors go through the scene. We're discussing movement, camera angles, all that stuff. And then the actors go by set. We do it by set. So I'll rehearse everything, let's say in the Quartermain living room. Then I'll move to Sonny's living room. Then I'll go to, let's say, Nina's office, or the hub. And we rehearse, all the sets that we, and we tape them that way as well. So once we get through one group of actors, they go to makeup, get ready, finished. We move on to the next group of things. And at 8:30, the taping begins. At that point, the camera crew comes and we tape until 12:45 when we have a lunch break. Actually, we have another 15-minute break at approximately 10:30 in the morning, and we do another group of blocking, meaning we talk to the actors about the scenes and tell them about where we would like them to, I explain where I would like them to be moving, what I think the scenes are about. And then we continue taping till lunch when we have an hour break. I again go and block with the actors at lunch, and we tape starting at 1:45, and usually we finish at maybe 6:30 or 7:30, and we'll have another 3:30 period where there's a 15-minute break for the crew, and then we have another blocking period. Sometimes there are multiple directors on one day because we're doing multiple different episodes. So I might get a little break for an hour or two while someone else is doing their scenes.
Right.
But it's definitely nerve-wracking, and particularly when you get a wedding or a funeral or a
Oh,
shooting,
I can
or
imagine that. Yeah.
yeah.
How
But
many
it's
how many
fun.
days a week is that?
I'm sorry.
How many days like a week do you find yourself in that type of schedule?
Well, my schedule, let's say I'm doing one episode in a week, it might be done over 2 days. So
Okay.
I might be coming in on Monday and Wednesday because perhaps the set can't be up until Wednesday. So, some of the scenes have to be done later. So I might come in on Monday and do the bulk of my show and have the type of schedule I just described to you. And maybe on Wednesday, I would come in and do, scenes that start after lunch at 1:45.
Right, right.
But possibly I could be doing 2 episodes in a week. So in that case, I might be working Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I might have 2 really long days and one medium long day. And then don't forget that prior to that, I have to get the script and plan out what I'm going to do. Because when we get into the studio, we have to know everything we're going to do. We know all the camera cuts. We know all of the line changes. We know everything because we can't afford to lose any time in the studio. So we spend our time ahead of time really mapping it out and planning it all very specifically.
Wow. You know, when you were talking about like, because just knowing the intricate details, okay, because you even mentioned how going through the Quartermain living room and you're at Sonny's house. Now, there have been some set changes because we know the Quartermain mansion has changed. How do you adapt to those kind of set changes and how you direct on set?
Yeah, well, you know, it's like one day you're reading a script and it says Sonny's living room, and you're thinking about, okay, well, the desk is over by the door, and then it's all dark, and the staircase is in the middle, and then you come in and they say, oh no, we're changing Sonny's living room. It's a totally new set now. So, you know, you have to learn a new set. It's kind of like a character on the show. I mean, one of the sets we've had for a really long time is Kelly's. You could go back. You could go back and look at scenes of Rose Kelly in the diner from 1979, and it's basically the same set. So, you know, but there are subtle changes that happen in sets. Sometimes new doors appear, new pieces of furniture that you've never seen before. You know, things that, you know, the storyline says that someone has to listen and not be seen. So magically, there's a new part of the set you've never seen before.
And Kelly's was Mike's at one point in time, wasn't it? Wasn't it Mike's, owned by Sonny's dad?
Yeah, Mike was there. Exactly. That was in the 90s, you know, after, but Kelly's started really long time ago under Gloria Monty. And so I think everyone's owned Kelly's. I think, I guess Laura owned, or the Spencers own it now, right?
Sean owned it at one point.
Oh yeah.
Sonny's dad. I feel like, is Cameron like the owner or the manager? I always get so confused.
You know what? I can't remember exactly who owns it now. I know it's some type of Spencer family concern, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe Bobby owns it.
Okay, I think so. Maybe Laura owns it, and it's a historical monument of Port Charles.
Could be. Yeah.
Now, you know, when I think about it, just with the set changes on GH, and you're probably used to kind of the pacing. I also know that you were part of Night Shift. So what was that like, since I'm assuming the pacing was a little bit different than how it was with GH? What was that like?
Yeah, well, I actually joined GH in 2007 while they were taping Night Shift 1.
Okay.
And Night Shift 1 was taped at the same studio as General Hospital using the same sets. And that was provided a few problems because it meant you had to get extra episodes into our already tight schedule.
Right.
When Night Shift 2 came around, they gave it its own studio that was actually in a town over, a small little studio that they later shot a soap opera called Hollywood Heights in as well. And now it's a studio that they do some of ABC's other shows and some of the sitcoms. I think James Patrick Stewart, who plays Valentine on our show, he's on another show that's currently shooting at Andrita Studios, which is where we did Night Shift 2. And you'll notice that when Night Shift 2 came on, we had that different hub. We had this different part of the hospital we had never seen before. And then once Night Shift 2 ended, that part of the hospital came to regular General Hospital and became our main set. And they got rid of, you know, you remember the round hospital.
Yeah, I can't forget that. Yeah, I remember that.
With Jesse and all the elevators and yeah. So that set went away, which I think was sad because that to me was General Hospital. But this new set has so many different areas you can play, and it's got the stairs, and so it's a fun set to work in, and it allows a lot of opportunities. The round set was a smaller set, and I think that reflected kind of the late 1970s, early 80s aesthetic of the show. The show, you know, was a compact show. The sets were not that big, right, but they've gotten a little bigger. Although now we're at the point of trying to slim them down as well because we want more places where people can play. Right. You know, but yeah, I mean, if you look at the Quartermains, that set has changed over the years.
Yeah, the stairs on the other side now.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, those Quartermains, they love their renovations.
Exactly. That one kind of threw me a loop, seeing that was kind of on the other side. And I want to ask you this too, Fido. What was do you remember your first scene that you directed on GH?
I do remember the first scene I directed on GH, but I have to tell you that the first scene I directed on GH was in 2000 and approximately 2001, or maybe it was then. And what it was that Luke had a bar and he was interested in Felicia.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And he and they were just reintroducing the character of Roy, played by A. Martinez. And the first scene I had was when Bobby came into Luke's bar and saw that Roy was back. And so that was a pretty exciting episode. And also in that episode, Luke and Felicia were confessing their feelings for each other. And there was also a scene where Sonny Corinthos was dating a FBI agent named Hannah, I think her name was.
Yeah, Hannah. It was Hannah. Yeah.
She had a dream where she thought that he had discovered that she was the mole, and she woke up from the dream and was very upset. But my first episode when I came to join General Hospital full time was scenes. It involved Carly I think Carly was with Jax, and a gunman she was in a hotel room, and there was a gunman who came to the hotel. I'm sorry?
Is that in
2007?
Okay, yeah, because she was with Jax around that time. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. But the first significant thing I remember really doing on General Hospital was the masked ball, where I guess it was Emily got killed and Anthony Zaccara was introduced as the killer. And, or maybe we didn't know who the killer was yet. And that was fun because I had just come from the soap opera Passions, which had a lot of supernatural, ghostly things. And so this ball where there was a killer lurking anywhere at any time, and everyone was worried about what room the killer might be in, reminded me of the silliness of Passions. And in that same episode, Sam and Jax were on a boat that got hit with bullets, and Jax protected Sam from a hail of bullets. So, and also we went until 2:45 in the morning that night, and that was that was the way General Hospital was for a while, where you go really late.
How did you manage those days?
Yeah.
How did you manage those days, like those long schedules like that?
Well, on those days, you really only did one day a week, so you had time to recover. Now that we are, we work for maybe we take off about 15 weeks out of the year, and so when we have to make the shows from those weeks, so that we put those shows into other weeks, and that's why we sometimes have to work multiple days in the week.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, because I've been seeing, since the whole hearing that's going on and the preemption, how does that affect like the stuff with production and stuff that goes on at GH when the preemptions happen? Or if you're allowed to talk about that.
Well, we usually learn, we usually are there taping, and, someone will come in the booth and say, oh, we're preempted today. So we then, it did affect us once. And the way it affected us once is we had a special episode, and I can't remember which one it was. I think it was the Election Day episode, maybe, or maybe it was the Christmas episode. We got preempted, and we had to put the episode ahead of another episode where it wasn't really originally supposed to be, because it was important that the episode be on election. I think it might have been the Election Day episode. I can't quite remember. But usually things just run, and we just understand that we have one less episode to make that year. So,
Right. Because I was always wondering that, like, how that affects like telling the story and stuff like that. Because you sometimes watch a GH, I'm like, oh, when did this person end up here? How did they end up in that conversation? I realized it was preemption.
Yeah. I mean, here's the deal: if we are preempted in New York or on the East Coast, if we're preempted on the East Coast, for the full episode, then it doesn't air anywhere. And that means that 3 hours later on the West Coast, even if whatever made it be preempted on the East Coast has already passed and they're back on TV, they just either put on an old episode or they just put on, some other special programming. So it only, and in that case, then they would replay the episode the next day. If these days, they assume that if an episode gets preempted, let's say on the West Coast, and it doesn't get seen, but the East Coast saw it, or they preempt, if they play more than I think 20 minutes of it, then they don't replay it the next day unless it's probably a really important episode. But now that we are repeated on Hulu, I think they assume that people can just go to Hulu and watch it, or abc.com.
Gotcha. Well, another thing I wanted to touch on is when, just to kind of backtrack, we were talking about a little bit about the directing the scenes when Emily Corrigan got killed. I think that was a text message killer. How was that directing those high flying, high stakes scenes with the car and everything? Can you kind of like walk me through a little bit of that, what you can with that storyline when that happened? What you remember?
Well, it depends on if we have a car in the studio, that makes it very hard. I remember a scene where someone was driving away from the brownstone and the whole half of the set was turned into the old Brooklyn brownstone. And there was a limo driving away, and it was really hard to get a full shot of the whole thing. And we had to use a crane camera. And that was, it requires a lot of planning. You have to make a path for the car to drive that doesn't drive into all the camera people and all the crew. When you're working outside, of course, it's a lot easier. For instance, we do scenes now in this little park that's part of our lot. And, but yeah, the high stakes scenes, it's always, first of all, if you have an emotionally high stakes scene, that can be very nerve wracking. If an actor is leaving, and maybe they're being killed and they didn't want to be killed, that makes things very sad on the day. We have to really always be thinking about safety. So when we do stunts, there's a lot of, careful preparation. And normally we try to move as quickly as possible, but naturally when you have a shootout scene or something of that nature, it definitely slows down production a bit.
Because it even reminds me of like the moment where Sonny was, I think it was like in 2010, Karpov came to town. I think it was Igor Karpov, I think was his name. He was drowning Sonny in the water. I was like, I'm thinking about that, just talking about all this, how it must have been directing that in the water and everything and the safety precautions and all.
Yeah, no, it's funny. We have a bunch of different waters on the show. We have the docks, and you can put water in front of the docks that's about like 2.5 feet deep. But then if someone has to swim in the water, then we get this giant tank, and the giant tank is like 12 feet high or 15 feet high. And it's 15 feet maybe by 20 feet across, this circular thing. And we have these underwater cameras, we put housings around the cameras to make them watertight.
Oh wow!
And that's always really complicated to shoot, because how do you talk to someone underwater? And right. Recently we had Alexis found the dead body of Harmony's victim in the water. And so it's always there's so many. The great thing about a soap opera is some days it's a sitcom, some days it's a romantic show, some days it's a medical hospital drama, other days it's a true crime story. So you're always on your toes, because some days it could just be people sitting in Kelly's talking across a cup of coffee. Other days it's all bedlam breaks loose in Port Charles.
Honestly, I feel like in a way soaps almost like paved the way. I want to go out on limits. I feel like it almost paved the way for almost every show I feel like we've seen on TV. Because I feel like when I think back to it, like sitcoms to me in this way, I've never heard this opinion before. I could be just on my own island with this, but I feel like sitcoms remind me a lot of soaps in certain ways. Do you see that kind of parallel at times?
I do, and one of the reasons for that, even though nowadays a lot of sitcoms are done with one camera, but what we do in soap opera is we shoot with multiple cameras, and it's called multi-camera shooting. And in the dawn of time, filmmaking was born. And filmmaking in the 1920s was they took one camera and they filmed something. And then if they needed to go to a close-up, they would just move, film the camera for the master shot, then go back and take the close-up. In the 1940s, they started to, they had radio and they thought, well, what if we could transmit television pictures? So they started to develop video and television transmission. And in that case, you wouldn't be able to shoot everything once and then everything again because it's a live radio-like format. So they devised this idea of having multiple cameras all fed to a switcher where someone could switch from one camera to the other. And at that point, you had to stage things in such a way that everyone was facing the proper camera that needed to get their close-up, which is very different from film, because in film, you have all 360 degrees of the set around you. But in television, you were essentially filming what was theater. And in theater, you only have three walls, because the audience is looking in through the fourth wall. So multi-camera live television in the 1950s sort of went away when they started making television shows on film. However, soap operas and news kept that format because you had to move so quickly. And I remember in the early years, sitcoms were done on video the same way. But then once television in the 1960s went to film, they started doing them a different way. However, in the 1970s, the TV show All in the Family was one of the first situation comedies that switched back to the multi-camera video method. And that method is still used today on like The Big Bang Theory, on a lot of the sitcoms you see. So yeah, it's a very similar thing.
Now, is it also,
how we
shoot
our show?
I was gonna say, was it also done that way because soaps used to be filmed live at one point? Was that part of that?
Absolutely, because all television was live. I mean, in the 1950s, when television began, everything was live. And then they developed a way that they could film a television screen. And that way, something could be transmitted on the East Coast live, and then they could send it to the West Coast on film, and it could be played the West Coast a week later. And that's when they devised networks for that. So soap opera, once videotape came into existence, it took a while for soap operas to adapt to that. But and for a long time, we would film the shows as if they were live, but just tape them. So nowadays we film it scene by scene, which means you can concentrate on getting a scene correct. I have to tell you, a couple of years ago, we did a live episode.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about that. I was going to ask you, how did you get that correct?
That was the most amazing thing, because we had 8 cameras. We normally have 4. On that day, we had 8 cameras. We had all the cast all around this, the whole studio. Each had a different set. They would be cued right before their scene. We would do it live. Now, what you have to understand is that One Life to Live had done a week of live episodes a couple of years before, but they're on at 2:00, and they were based in New York, which meant that they went live at 2 p.m. So they had all that time to rehearse. When we went live, we had to be live in New York at 3 p.m., which meant that was noon in Los Angeles. But wait, there's more, because Boston happens to be on at 2:00, which is unusual. They're the only, or maybe we might be on at 2:00 in New York, but we were on, I think, at 3. But Boston is an hour before. And so we had to do the show twice that day. And what we did was at 11 a.m., we did the first live showing to Boston. And then we had our closing credits, and we had 1 minute and 45 seconds to get everyone ready to go do the whole show again. And you may recall that 2 people had been shot in that episode. One was Carlos, who got killed, and one was Hayden, who got shot in the head and was brought to the hospital all bloody. So but after the end of Act 6, during the closing credits and during the minute handed over, Rebecca Budig had to go get into full new makeup, and Carlos had to get his shirt because his shirt had like 6 bullet blood packs in it. Right. He had to go get a new shirt, get all the blood taken away, and we did the show immediately again. And we had been there since 5 a.m. that morning rehearsing. We had started rehearsing at 5 a.m. We had started it the Friday before, but we came in to rehearse at 5 a.m. And by 11 a.m., we did it at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., and again at 9:30. We did it 4 times before we actually transmitted it. And actually, only one scene went wrong on my day. They had done a live show on Friday. I did the Monday, and my show, I think we got it a little better on my day. But it was unusual because I was trying to do a lot of interesting things. I had a split screen so that on one side was Sean Baker was going to shoot Rebecca Budig.
Sniper,
and then in the other room, we had them in the other room because I knew that the timing was so important to see him to see him shooting and to see this hand grab the gun as soon as he was shooting, because later on the clue would be that he didn't actually shoot her, but some other person in a doorway, in the other doorway up in the back of the garage shot her. So I knew that I needed it to be absolutely fail safe so that we could see her get shot and see him shooting and see the hand get interrupted. So, it was technically a lot of fun and a lot of challenge, and I never needed my crew's help more than I did on that day, and they made it amazing.
I could imagine. I mean, what would you say was the most challenging part about Live Week? Because it wasn't a week, it was that day, right? It was a day.
We did a Friday and a Monday live.
Okay. What was the most challenging about that?
Yeah, the most challenging thing was, the end of every scene. Someone will say, "I'm not your father, he is," and cut to the other person, and they look at the camera.
Yeah.
And it zooms into them. And then you cut to some other scene where someone has to burst through the door. Well, the timing between those cuts on the live day is also part of the dance. So you had to be almost, okay, look at the reaction shot, ready to cue the people in the, Sonny's living room. Okay, cue them, and then cut to it. So it was a lot of, it was a different mechanism then, and also to be told we're stretching. Okay, tell them to speed it up. I mean, that was something that we weren't used to. But we had an associate director that day who was used to doing live, so she was telling us blow by blow. The show's getting longer, the show's getting shorter. So we knew. But it was funny because in the first episode that we did, the first showing at 11 a.m. for Boston at 2 o'clock, there was a scene with Rick Hurst playing Rick, Roger Howarth playing, I think, Todd, or maybe Franco. I can't remember. I think it was Franco. And we had Michelle Stafford as Nina, and she was going to be marrying Rick. And Franco was there to try to stop her. And so in the first showing, we were running long, so we had to cut that. We had to give them a cut for that scene. So the first page of that scene, one of the scenes was gone. And then we ended up long. I mean, we ended up with long credits for that one. We had miscalculated, and the show really wasn't long. So when we came back to do the second version of it, we told them to reinstate that part of the scene. So the West Coast got to see another page and a half of the show than the East Coast did.
This is kind of cool learning about all this information in the background, because I've always wondered how all this type of stuff plays out on the show. Because I know that on soaps, you guys have to, there's a minute schedule, because you have to make sure that minute by minute, and for the next show starts after that, whatever syndication. So that's I can only imagine when it was live, how that was trying to make sure you guys were still on par of the minutes.
Yeah. No, it was quite a challenge. We had to do a lot of preparation and practice for that.
Now,
but it helps us because we need to move fast. So sometimes even now we'll act as if we're live. If we're inside Kelly's, then we have to cut outside to people, and we won't do it as 2 separate scenes. Or if someone in one table at the restaurant, we cut to the people at the bar. We just try to keep that timing and that life. Now, the live episodes were so great. The cast were on fire. They were so pumped. And everyone, brought their A game, and no one even dropped a line. It was incredible.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I love the live lead. I think probably because they were just so used to it on the regular, but now it's just like it's live. So it's like, because I mean, is it true in soap that they only get like one take?
Well, what happens is we go through the scenes at 7 a.m. and we read through them, and I say, okay, on that line, when you go to get the knife, walk over to the desk over here and stay looking out the window because you're trying to see if Max is coming with whatever. And then they go away, and we come back at 8. We do a dress rehearsal where we show it to the cameras. This is what's happening. That's what's happening. They go through the scene. Then we might give them a note about something in the storyline they may not know about. It's like, oh, don't forget, in this moment, you may not have read the script yet, but you're talking about X, Y, and Z. So that we might give the actor a moment's note about something like that, or a technical thing of like, oh, you're on this camera, so make sure to turn at that point here, and then we tape it. And if something doesn't work out, we tape it again. Or if we tape it and someone forgets a line or they fall or something and it doesn't work out, we may have really liked the take. So we'll find a place where we can splice in, which we call a pickup. And we'll do a pickup and we say, okay, we're going to pick up with, Sam's line, Jason, how could you? And, so we pick up with that line and continue the scene on. Sometimes we'll do a scene and it'll be a really emotional scene and the actors will say, oh, can I do that again? And we'll say, definitely. So we'll do it again. And maybe we'll say, well, you know what? The first take was really better until this moment. And then the moment that maybe wasn't so good in the other take, we're like, oh, that's better here. So let's make a mix of the two takes. Or sometimes, it's the second take is way better. Right. Sometimes some actors really don't like to do more than one take because they really want to feel spontaneous in what they do.
Right. Is that so the way they can feel more connected into the scene?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked about the scene, we've rehearsed the scene, we've lived through the scene, and then we capture the scene. I think some people, when they hear they only do one take, it's as if we pull them in off the street and we're like, sit down. Okay, go, like, and that they're like, okay, Laura, happy anniversary or whatever,
I was thinking that because they always say how soaps are intense, and it's like I'm honestly thinking it was like one take. Like I'm guessing there would have been some exceptions or go back, but I was thinking like for the most part it's just one take and done. That's what I thought.
It's true. It's true, unless the actors are drunk, which never happens. Never happens.
What I want to ask is, what was it like directing the Metro Court hostage? Were you around for that time?
I was not around. I guess I came a little bit after that.
Oh my God. Because I know that was like an umbrella storyline, was ensemble where everybody was in the room and then the explosions and all that high stakes stuff storyline. I was like, I got to ask him about that. But
I had come, I think, about 4 months after that.
Oh man.
but 2 years later, they tried to do a similar storyline in the hospital where the hospital had some little balls that had horrible toxin in it, and they closed the hospital down. It was a pathogen.
Okay.
And Trevor, who was Rick's father, was the mastermind behind it. He was going to release the toxin into like the water system or something.
Oh yeah. I remember that.
I don't know, but the way that they delivered the toxin was in these small white balls that would deliver the toxin, and we just would refer to Trevor's, white balls. So, it was that was not as good a storyline as the Metro Court hostage situation.
One thing I want to ask you is, and I know this isn't GH related, but okay, because you had mentioned this in terms of Passions, and I know Passions was just so over the top. It had all these super. What was that like directing Passions? What was the most challenging story you had to direct on there? Because I'm a huge Passion fan, so I watched all the soaps, but I was a really huge Passion fan, so I had to ask you about that.
Passions was, General Hospital is my favorite job. I love it. It's great. But Passions was like my heart's desire. I mean, I loved the unusual nature of, you know, the characters. We had zombies, we had witches, warlocks, genies. I mean, all kinds of things. Passions was amazing, but possibly one of my favorite scenes was when Julian Crane and Tabitha decided to give in to a night of passion, and they were in her boudoir, which had jungle swings, and it was filled with a menagerie of animals, like an ostrich and a spider monkey. And she was wearing this Jane wig, and he was dressed like Tarzan, I think. But it was, I mean, it was scenes like that that you just couldn't imagine. Or working with Precious, the orangutan. You know,
yeah, that.
you know, with Mama and Kelly, Beth living in that house with Precious and keeping Sheridan in the basement. It was just so fun. I also, I mean, we had a lot of green screen because there was an episode where Teresa went to hell and she was going down this corridor on her chariot. And, you know, we couldn't do that without green screen, but we had an incredible special effects team that enabled us to do things that were just on the cutting edge at the time. I mean, it still looked crazy. It was silly, but we were Passions, and we you know, the story was the star. And I mean, there was everything about Passions was crazy and difficult to direct. But the one thing about Passions is that if we had a party, you know, there was a cocktail party once that lasted for 14 episodes. And in that cocktail party, what would normally happen was two people would be talking, like Sam and Ivy would be talking about something, and she was about to tell him something that she had to tell him. And he would, of course, interrupt her and say, "Oh, no, wait, Ivy, I think I know what you're going to tell me. You're going to say," and then he would spin some crazy story. But at the party, there would be groups of 4 or 5 people standing around, like Rebecca and her mother would be saying, Rebecca and
Is it Gwen?
Gwen
Would
be saying, "Oh no, Ivy's about to tell Sam that Ethan is really his son."
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and then, you know, and then Teresa would be sitting with her mother and go, "Oh my God, Mama, I think Ivy's just about to tell him about the email that I sent telling him about the father." And then there would be like a reporter being held by Crane security saying to himself, "I know what Ivy's about to do. She's about to tell Sam that he's really the father of Ethan, but I'm going to get the scoop first, and I'm going to publish it in my tabloid." So it was just, you know, you'd have these parties that would go on for days and days and days, and no characters could move because they had to be able to stand next to the person that they were going to talk to about what was happening. So that was a little annoying because, you know, as a director, you want scenes where people can move around and you can have movement. You know, with Passions, it was just kind of like set up the pieces and just shoot them. You know,
right. I honestly knew your favorite scene was going to involve Juliet Mills to play Tabitha. I just knew it because she probably had the most. Tabitha had those crazy scenes on Passions. So I was like, I knew it. I just knew you were going to say her name because she had all the supernatural stuff. And Dora would be talking in floating bubbles. And
Tabitha and Timmy was the greatest duo, and to work with them was so much fun. So much fun. I mean, I could name 30 things. I could name when Julian fell into the tuna fish cannery, and I could name when Timmy was at a gas station and the bird of Mordred came down and tried to peck at him when he was in the bathroom, and Tabitha told him to put a toilet paper roll on the bird's beak, and the property department, all they had was a giant toilet paper roll, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning. We're like, "Where's the toilet paper roll?" And the props department brings in this like industrial sized toilet paper roll, and they thought, well, it's because it's in a public bathroom, and we were like, but that won't stop the bird's beak from, you know, opening up and killing poor Timmy. But it was 1 o'clock in the morning, so he had to put the silly, you know, thing on there. It was entertaining. Yeah, and when Timmy and Julian went on the yellow brick road to the Wizard of Oz, I mean, anything about Passions was amazing.
So many notable storylines with Passions. It was like there was never a boring day. I never knew what was gonna happen. You just, I mean, with Tabitha alone had all these hijinks. Someone would be in her basement in hell or something, and there would be ghouls and goblins, and that's
yeah, the friends in the basement.
Yeah, the friends in the basement. I think one day they were trying to get at Spike, eat him up or something because he was in the basement at the time. And that's why I was like, I just only imagine like what it was like working on the set of that, like with all those crazy storylines. What do you think, especially working as a director on Passions, what do you think really separated it from the rest of the soaps? Obviously, we love all the other soaps too. What do you think made it so unique?
Well, Passions had a sense of humor about itself. So we were,
yeah,
we you know, but we didn't consider ourselves to be a spoof. We weren't like soap, or you know, we still. I thought we had characters that we loved. We, you know, when Teresa was upset, we got upset. When, you know, when Julian was, you know, drunk in the gutter, we still were like, ah, Julian Crane, you know, you got yours. So you could still root for the people. Passions, obviously, what separated it was the genius mind of Jim Riley, who came up with it. I think that the producer Lisa DeCazat, she was so supportive, and she you know, talked whatever the writers came up with, she found a way to do it. We had incredible special effects people. Everyone was so dedicated on that show because what we were asked to do was so impossible. I mean, you know, oh, the whole town is going to be submerged by a tsunami, you know, and the characters are going to be floating around for you know, a week's worth of episodes. You know, just insane thing. And weirdly enough, we ended up shooting that on the old Seinfeld stage.
oh wow,
Seinfeld had just ended and their studio was empty. So they set up a gigantic swimming pool on the stage, and they put the front of all the sets in there. And we had all the characters, you know, standing outside their house looking at, and we had giant dumps of water on them. It was really, you know, so first all the sets were in this place without any water. And then we dumped all the water, and then the whole thing was submerged. So then we had all the sets with water up to the door. But yeah, Passions, I think that's what separated it. But don't forget, in the 1960s, there was a soap opera called Dark Shadows.
yep.
And Dark Shadows was a supernatural gothic show. And we, oddly enough, I watched Dark Shadows recently, or much of it. They were also very campy and very funny. And they didn't take themselves too seriously, I don't think, on some level. And we at Passions licensed their music library. So we would, in the last half of Passions, we got their music library. So we were playing a lot of the same music that they played on Dark Shadows. And that was ironic because Dark Shadows was essentially our, you know, godparent. Dark Shadows was we were the love child of Dark Shadows and Mary Hartman, which was another soap opera in the 70s that was, you know, kind of larger than life.
I feel like Dark Shadows almost like it's like I always say I feel like it paved the way because I actually started watching it myself too. Dark Shadows. I'm weird. Sometimes I'll go back and watch old soaps. I'm watching Another World from 1999 right now. But
well, if you want to watch the best old soap that I discovered a couple of years ago, and I'm going to let you say what you want to say in a minute, but Edge of Night from 1977 to 1980 is all available because Procter and Gamble released it in the early days, and you can find it on YouTube. And that is I think it's one of the best soap operas I ever watched. And I was not a fan at the time. So going back, I watched it. And the reason I watch it is because when I'm preparing scripts at home, I like to have television on in the background, but it can't be television that's too complicated. So if it's a soap opera, I can kind of follow it. But what were you going to say? You like to watch old soap operas. You're watching Another World. That was the soap opera that I first watched when I was a kid in high school. And that was also the soap opera where I first was a student intern.
Yeah. How was that? Like entering over Another World?
Incredible. They filmed it in Brooklyn. at a studio that was way out in Brooklyn. And it had been a place where they filmed movies with swimming, like Busby Berkeley swimming movies. I think with I can't remember the famous Esther Williams, I think they filmed these films. But then it was turned into a television studio, and they filmed Another World and other soap operas in there. And then Another World took over the whole studio for a couple of years. And then Cosby came in, and the Cosby Show was there for like 10 years in the same studio. So Another World and Cosby shared the studios. But I was there before Cosby was there, and I was a student intern, and I got college credit, and my only responsibility was I had to stay till the end on Friday nights so that I could help the studio manager write down when the crew's call would end for the timesheets. So in exchange for that, I got free run of the studio, and I could observe anything I wanted. So I would sit in the control room, and I would get copies of the script. Actually, I don't even think I ever got copies of the script, but I would hang out in the makeup room. I would watch dress rehearsal. I would, I just wandered around, and I absorbed everything. I would watch them put up sets, take down sets. And I was in college at the time, learning about television production. And actually, I think I did have scripts, because I remember using a script for my college live television final project. I did 4 scenes from Another World, but it ended up only being 2 scenes from Another World, because I didn't have time to do all 4 scenes, because it was harder than I thought.
Wow. I'm hearing all this stuff about, like, because you've been on so many soaps. There's one soap I want to ask you about a little bit later on, but like to hear about this, because I'm watching all these soaps, and I feel like now I've been a soap watcher, I want to say, for like probably 20 some years now. I started off watching All My Children back when I was 12,
Yeah.
and just seeing, like, now I'm understanding the other side of soaps, the writing and the production side and all the other stuff that goes on with it. I mean, like, that's why I was asking about Passion, to see what's going on with there and all those high over the top storylines. And I'm definitely going to be catching up with Edge and Night, because I'm always looking for an older soap opera watch. I'm on Another World and Search for Tomorrow. I'm on both of those. Yeah, watching both of those right now. Because it's so cool to see that evolution of soaps that it's had, like, throughout the years, the way it told stories, and, like, even when I was watching classic episodes of As the World Turns from the 1950s. And
yeah, incredible, right?
Yeah, and just seeing how it, like, evolved, even with GH, just seeing the evolution of the storylines, the dialogue, the directing, the producing, all of that. I'm just like, man, soaps, to me, like I said, it really seemed like it paved the way for a lot of the stuff that we have out even now that we're seeing on TV. I wanted to ask you about, because I looked it up and I started watching, because I did not know MTV had a soap. I did not know this. Spyder Games. I did not. What was that like, directing on Spyder Games? If you can talk to me about that.
Spyder Games was great. I had been in New York. I had been working on a show, Sunset Beach, and I left Sunset Beach and I went to New York, and I started freelancing at As the World Turns, Guiding Light, All My Children, and One Life to Live. I was just
done it all.
I was working between those shows, and then I came back to Los Angeles to visit, and I went to visit my friend Lisa DeCazat from Passions, and she said, "Oh, Tony Marina, who was a director on Sunset Beach, who I knew, is doing a new soap opera over at KTLA. You should give him a call." Because I was, at the time, I had been offered a full-time job on Guiding Light. And I loved Guiding Light, but I had grown up on Guiding Light as a worker at Guiding Light. And I felt that when I directed there, and I directed there for, I think, a month or 2 months, I was substituting for another director who was taking a leave of absence. And when I was there, they liked me, but the actors, it was hard to go back to a show where I had been the coffee boy, So I didn't want to go back to Guiding Light, and so I was curious about this soap opera that Lisa told me Tony Marina was doing at KTLA, and so I called Tony, And he said, "Oh, Phideaux, yeah, well, you should come over to the studio. Come on over and I'll show you around." So I went to the studio, and he said, and he started explaining to me the studio they were building the sets. He said, "Yeah, we're going to have one studio here where we're going to be able to do the standing sets, and we'll have this, the house will be here, the shop will be there, the office will be here. This is what it's going to look like." And he started showing me the set plans. And he asked me, he said, "Oh, get Phideaux a copy of the first 10 scripts." And so someone was going to deliver me these scripts. And I'm like, "Oh, this all sounds exciting." And he's like, "Yeah." And then he says to me, "So I thought you would do 2 episodes a week, and so-and-so would do 2 episodes a week. And then this other guy would do 1 episode a week. And then sometimes I would do episodes." He was talking about himself. And I was like, "Wait a minute, when did the job offer come?" And he just, it was like magic. It was like, I was in the right place at the right time. I presented myself to him. He's like, "Oh, this guy will work. This will be good." And we did the soap, and it was a 13-week thing. And I had the wonderful opportunity to work with 2 actresses that I had worked with on Sunset Beach, Christina Chambers and Sean Batten. I think that's their names. I loved both of them dearly. And the characters that they played on Spyder Games were so much cooler than the characters they played on Sunset Beach. Spyder Games was a great, great, great show. A lot of fun and pushed the envelope in many ways. It was written by this writer, Christian McLaughlin, and his partner, Valerie Ahern. And I think that's their names. I hope that's their names. And they were really talented, and they mapped it out beautifully. Christian has written some great books as well that are kind of soapy if you ever want to read something funny. But and I think Spyder Games is on YouTube. It's definitely worth a watch. It was a lot of fun. It was sad because they didn't show it right away. And then they kind of, MTV went through a transition of executives, and the executives who wanted Spyder Games were gone by the time Spyder Games was on. So the executives didn't believe in Spyder Games, so they just kind of put it on and didn't really promote it.
Yeah, I mean, because I didn't even know about Spyder Games. When I started watching it, it almost reminded me a little bit of Passions when I was watching it.
Very quirky show. Yeah.
Yeah.
It had humor. It had a lot of quippy humor,
Which I love that aspect of it. I mean, like I said, even Passions, I love that aspect of it. Like how you said, we knew it wasn't a spoof. We knew it was clearly a soap, but it's just like the way it really pulled in all those soap tropes that we would always see. And the way they did it. And it was so over the top that sometimes I'm like, are they serious? But then at the same time, like, I got to still tune in and see what's going to happen to Pretty Crane or Julian.
That's the fun about soap operas is, I mean, even in the 70s when Luke and Laura were on the run because Mikos Cassadine was going to freeze the world, or Robin had befriended an alien from outer space, or how many people come back from the dead? I mean, like Helena Cassadine has her basement, frozen Stavros in the basement of the hospital. There's so many things that are crazy. I mean, I guess As the World Turns never really jumped the shark, but Guiding Light had a clone. Reva was a clone.
Reva's clone. Oh my gosh. Reva's clone Dolly.
Yeah, right. I mean, One Life to Live with time travel back to the Old West.
Oh, I love it.
They would go to underground cities. Eterna, heaven. Vicky would be in heaven for a month. I mean, I guess the only soap operas that really, never did crazy things were like Ryan's Hope, but all the shows had some pretty outrageous things, and if they weren't outrageous, they at least were always trying to up the drama. Nowadays, we've got the Real Housewives, and we have the kinds of reality shows about hoarders or My 600-Pound Life, or we see extremes in television these days that soap operas used to be the only thing that would provide extremes.
Right. Because I even think about the time when Olivia Quartermaine now was having psychic visions.
Heather gave her LSD and she became a psychic, and she became a real psychic, and even to this day, I wouldn't be surprised if Olivia doesn't have some psychic stuff coming up,
Oh my God. I got a feeling like, see, that's what I love about soaps is that even though they might have something in one time period, there's always a possibility they could just bring it back up some years
Yeah.
down the line, and pick it back up like as if nothing ever went away. So maybe Olivia could have some psychic visions about a ELQ murder or something. Who knows? Somewhere down the line.
Well, I mean, it was especially hard during the pandemic because we would have actors that maybe had a close contact, or there would be a reason why someone couldn't come to work,
Right.
and you'd have to suddenly have some new actor playing a part. But on a soap opera, it's kind of like repertory theater. You're just like, oh, that's Sam today. It looks like Teresa from Passions, or
Yeah, you'd get the announcer saying the role of Sam McCall is now being played by.
right. And you hope that it's being played today by, because when it's
Right.
now being played by, that always upsets the audience.
Oh yeah,
maybe,
that's right.
or maybe sometimes they like that.
I want to ask because I don't want to not forget to ask about this, because I am a huge Guiding Light fan. So I have to ask you a couple questions about Guiding Light. What was it like directing on there? And do you remember your first scene that you directed on Guiding Light?
Well, the first scene I directed on Guiding Light was the first scene I directed anywhere ever.
Oh.
And that scene, because I worked at Guiding Light after college until 1996. And then I went to, or 1995, and then I went to One Life to Live. So right before I left Guiding Light, I had been asking to direct for a while, and they assigned me my first set of scenes. And they were in a diner, and they involved Rick Hurst, who played a character on Guiding Light called Alan Michael. He later went on to General Hospital, where he played Sonny's brother, Rick.
Mm-hmm.
So he and a woman named Jean Carroll was playing a character, Buzz's wife, Nadine. And there was an actress named Jennifer Roselle who played a character called Elena. And so I had three little scenes with Alan Michael, Elena, or Laney, and Nadine. And it was nerve-wracking and horrifying. And I had been an AD on the show, which meant I was the person who talked to the camera people and told them what their shots were at the behest of the director. So I was the liaison between the cameras and the director. And I also was the editor of the show. So this was my first time being the one to call the shots and talk to the actors. And so, the actors were really super nice, very supportive. Later on, I did a love scene a couple weeks later with Eleni and Frank. That was nerve-wracking. And then I got to do, I think, half an episode, or then I went to One Life to Live and went through the same thing where they started letting me do some scenes. And the first scenes I ever had at One Life to Live involved the character of Carlos Hesser, and Alex, I think, played by Alex, the very dramatic character on One Life to Live.
Alex Olnoff, right? I think she's also on GH. Yeah, Alex Olnoff.
Yeah. And that was a great fun working with them. They were amazing. Then I also, at the same time, had an opportunity to start directing at Another World. And my first day at Another World, I got to work with the woman who plays Rachel Corrie, Victoria Wyndham.
Yeah.
And I had grown up watching that show, and I loved her on the show. So that was a thrill. And in fact, it was odd because I was in New York City and I was in Grand Central Station, and there was an actress from Another World who played a character, a young ingenue. And I had just started watching Another World again because I was going to direct it. And I knew that she was in my first script, and she was walking through Grand Central Station. And I went up to her and I said, "Oh, excuse me, I don't mean to bother you, but I know you're on the show Another World." And she's like, "Yeah, okay, who are you?" And I said, I just wanted to say that I'm going to be directing you on that show in a week. So I'll see you there. And that was kind of funny because I'm sure she thought I was a crazed fan.
Right. Little did she know she was going to see you the next week.
But then I saw her there again, and she actually came onto General Hospital. I can't remember everyone's name, but she came onto General Hospital and played a lawyer for Sonny for a while. And Gosh, she was
Yes,
such a great
Claire
actress.
something. Yeah, I remember that. Yep, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember that
She
character.
played Claire on General Hospital. Yeah. And she was just a great, great, great actress. And Another World, when I worked there, it was wonderful. I was working at One Life to Live and Another World simultaneously, and they were both in direct competition. So on a given day, you could see my name as the director of One Life to Live and my name as the director of Another World. And I don't think either of them liked that very much, but they were very kind to me.
Did you have a unique directing style for each soap? Would you say, like a unique way you directed for each soap?
I don't, I would say. I think I have the same directing style. I'm not that smart to have multiple styles, but I think I grew up on soap. I grew up on the set of soap operas after college. So I knew how they did it. And I admired a lot of directors. So I mean, where I say I didn't have any other style, I had the style of many other directors. And I think along the way, I would see what other people would do and I would be inspired by that. There's definitely a lot of the directors in this genre are absolutely incredible. They are some of the most inventive people that I've seen. I'm only glad that I've been able to learn about this multi-camera technique and how you work in concert with the actors to tell the story. It's a dance that you do. So my style was always just tell the story. Now, if you're working on a crazy show like Passions, I think the style is about how you stage the actors, because you could stage people to do really weird things that are kind of like cartoons. Like I remember at Passions, I had two people standing with their backs to each other, talking as if they were, no one could see that they were together, like you would do in a cartoon. And you wouldn't do that on As the World Turns. You wouldn't do that on Guiding Light. Guiding Light would be a much more real show than Passions. But then again, Passions could have a scene that was very real. General Hospital, I could, Dr. Obrecht, she's like a little bit of Passions.
Yeah,
in General Hospital.
She is.
Lucy Coe. Lucy, when you work with Lucy, you can do anything. That's what's incredible about General Hospitals, because we've got one of the greatest groups of characters and actors. I love all the new characters, but I just especially love the characters from history.
Right. I remember those scenes from Passions where I think there would be times, like you said, there would be at a dinner party, be Gwen, Rebecca, and then Ivy and somebody else in the corner, and they would just be looking around, and then you would hear their thoughts like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is gonna happen. What's gonna happen next?" And they hear the dun 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 dun.
Yeah. Or like with Tabitha, would be down in the basement looking at the party in a pool.
Yeah, her little brewery. Yeah, her little brewery. Yeah.
And they'd be having drinks and watching the party like it was a TV, or she'd be looking at something in the bowl. Remember the bowl in her living room?
Yep, then she would switch around and look into it. Yeah.
It was always like Tabitha at her bowl,
I think that was like super incredible seeing that, like those moments and those scenes. I was like, oh my God, Passions was just like that. So, but even I loved it when GH could even have those moments, like when Olivia was getting the visions of Dr. Ewan Keane at the time and all this other stuff. So I loved it when soaps will sometimes even just take that pause from reality and then just do something just so over the top like that. I was just I live for those storylines when they happen.
You and me both. I think that's what I liked. The first soap opera I watched as a kid was Another World, and they had a spin-off called Texas.
Yep.
And at one point, Texas had these characters called Ruby and Lurleen, and they were these two young single women, and Ruby was kind of the evil one, and Lurleen was the sweet innocent who just accidentally got caught up in Ruby's deadly schemes. And at one point, Ruby's ex-husband came back to town, and simultaneously they had this like Rubik's Cube thing, and they couldn't figure out how to open it. They thought it was a puzzle, and somehow they ended up with it. And they opened it up while Buzz was in the house, and it turned him into a mummy, and he died. It killed Ruby's ex-husband, and he died before their eyes. And they had to stuff his body in the trunk. And Grandma Kate was going to help them do a housewarming party that evening. And so she came in to help decorate the house. And meanwhile, in the trunk was the dead, mummified body of Buzz, who had been killed from poison gas from a mysterious Aztec artifact. And then they did this storyline after that about tracking down the Aztec artifact. But I mean, as a teenage boy, I thought that was pretty fun kind of stuff. It wasn't just like people kissing and talking about, so-and-so had an affair. I never understood soap operas that much when I was a real small kid until they started doing things like Luke and Laura, trying to battle the Cassadines. Right. So I like the Cassadine battle stuff.
Right. I'm like I said, I'm watching Another World right now, and I'm now into 1999, just finished 1998. And it's a Jordan Stark storyline. Don't familiar with that, where Jordan Stark comes in to Bay City and he's in love with Amanda Corey because she's the long lost love of his wife from 200 years ago in a past life.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's captivating though. I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. I know probably a lot of people weren't probably not a fan of that story at the time, but as I'm watching it now, I'm like, oh, this is good. I like this.
Well, that's why it's funny because, your General Hospital could be different from my General Hospital. Like my General Hospital is Luke and Laura freezing the world. It's Robert Scorpio. It's Nurse Jessie. It's Amy Vining at the nurse's station. It's, Dr. Rick. It's, it's Rick and Leslie. But for some people, it's Sonny Corinthos and Jason and Carly and AJ and that era. For other people, I guess now it would be, the newer Quartermains, it'll be Michael and Willow.
Right.
But, so it's so funny how different people like different things. Like I loved an era of Guiding Light. I loved the Riva era of Guiding Light. I wasn't into, other eras as much, but, so yeah. And I'm, as a kid, I was also a follower of the writers. So I would love, I loved the different writers or the different producers. I would be like, ooh, Gail Kobe, she produced Texas and it was amazing. And then that show got canceled and now she's at Guiding Light. I would love to go and see, what is Gail Kobe going to do with Guiding Light? So I started watching Guiding Light as a result of Texas being canceled. And then I followed that because I was interested in her as a producer, because Texas, when I first started watching it, was not a very good show. And then it was only on for 2 years. And the second year they got a new producer. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then suddenly the show got really good. And then they went to Guiding Light, Pamela Long and Gail Kobe, and they turned Guiding Light around. It had been in a bit of a slump, in my opinion, and that's why I wanted to work there. And so when I got out of college, my goal was to get a job at Guiding Light.
It's crazy because I do feel like you can, like, it's weird. Sometimes I feel like I'm like a soap historian because I'll be watching older soaps and I'll be like, this seems like so-and-so's writing, or this seems like so-and-so's production shot. And I'll check the credits. I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly so-and-so. It's like that. You can see that print that they have on there. It's so
absolutely that. Absolutely. It's so true. And, you see the producers go from show to show and, they introduce different elements, I mean, and oddly enough, one of the producers, Jill Farron Phelps, I first met her at Guiding Light when she came into Guiding Light. And then I went over to Another World when she gave me the opportunity to start directing at she gave me the opportunity to direct. Jill gave me my first opportunity to direct at Guiding Light. And then she left Guiding Light and she went to Another World. And then she invited me over to Another World. I went to Another World. And then I decided to take a job in California. So I didn't, continue at Another World. But then when I left my job in California, I wanted to come back to New York, and she was now the producer of One Life to Live. So I worked for Jill at One Life to Live. And then years later, after Passions got canceled, she invited me to fill in for someone at General Hospital. And that's how I got back over to General Hospital. And, and oddly enough, I was telling you about Tony Marina, who had given me the job on Spyder Games. After Passions got canceled, he invited me over to The Young and the Restless, where I had an opportunity to work for a year. So I worked in 2007, I was working at Passions, Young and Restless, and General Hospital all at the same time.
My gosh, that's like so crazy because I think that's so cool that you've gotten a chance to be on what it feels like almost every soap. I call it the Big 10 at the time because around I think it was I want to say 01 to like 06, there was at least 9 or 10 soaps on the air. And
Yeah.
I tried to keep up with all of them as a kid. It was tough, but I tried. I love soaps so
Wow.
much. Yeah, I tried to keep
Me
up.
too. I did. I mean, I had my channel. I was an NBC kid, but
Okay.
I wanted to know what was happening. So I would read soap opera magazines. And even
Same
though
here.
I didn't watch those shows, I would hate on them, which, hate is very close to love. So I
Right.
knew everything that was happening on All My Children. Even though I watched Days of Our Lives, I was very loyal. The Doctors, Days of Our Lives, Another World, you know. But so it was ironic, and it's ironic because I think I wished I had watched General Hospital because I knew it was great, but I was watching Another World and Days. And then Days kind of adopted the same attitude as General Hospital, and they became a lot more adventure oriented. And that was fun. And they had Marlena's twin sister was killed, and Days of Our Lives certainly had. That was one of the original crazy soap operas. That was a bold show, and it was created in the 1960s by Bill Bell, who then went on to create The Young and the Restless and Bold and Beautiful.
And
And
Another
Bold and
World.
Beautiful is the only show I've never worked on, which kills me to this day.
Also, he worked on Another World too. Don't forget Another World, the Bell.
He did. He co-created it with Agnes Nixon
Yeah. Yeah.
and Erna Phillips. It's true.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I mean, because I think when I was growing up, I was an ABC kid. I ended up first being an ABC kid. It was All My Children, What Life to Live in General Hospital. I can only watch All My Children in the summer at the time as a kid because it came on at 1 o'clock. I was still school most of the time. But normally I get home, I'd catch the last 15 minutes of One Life to Live. And for the most part, it would be GH. Just came on at 3 at that time.
Yeah.
On the East Coast. And I mean, honestly, just like when I first started watching soaps, I really didn't even know what it was. I was like, oh, this is good. And then I noticed it came on the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And I was like, okay, this is good. I was just so drawn in, and the storyline, the fact that they managed to go for this long, and I'm still happy that soaps are still going strong to this day. Because I know the challenges that they're facing. So I'm still happy that the genre is still going at this point.
Me too. I mean, at one point I was watching British soap operas, and I started to get into those, and they're great. First I was an EastEnders fan. Then someone told me about Coronation Street, so I started watching that. And then I started watching Emmerdale, loved it. Some of the other ones I knew about. I knew about Australia's Neighbours. But yeah, I think when I was a kid, the thing I liked about it was that the story, you could invest in the story and then it would continue. Yeah. You could see what, here's the movie, but what do the characters do after that? What do they do later after they find out that they, killed someone in their drunken stupor? It was so much more satisfying than a single episode of any other type of a show.
Yeah.
And there would be a wide variety of characters. I remember when I first watched Another World as a kid, there was a character called Iris, and she was played by this actress Beverly McKinsey.
Yep.
And she just was larger than life. She was basically the Alexis Carrington from Dynasty before there was Alexis Carrington from Dynasty. And an incredible actress, and the acting on soap operas I think is very good, and I thought it was very good at the time. So yeah, like you, and you were a fan of the greatest eras of One Life and General Hospital. I mean, those shows were really, very high quality shows for years and years and years.
Yeah, I mean, because looking at it too with soaps, I mean, I've just like the storylines, because even how you mentioned the generation. So my parents were watching. So my parents, when they came in from Haiti, one of the first shows they were watching was General Hospital. It was Luke and Laura. Nice. So sometimes I'll be watching, when I go to my mom's house, I'll be watching General Hospital. And she's like, "Oh, what is Nico doing there?" Because she still remembers Sonny as Nico for All My Children.
Right? Oh, I know exactly.
So she doesn't know that he's pretty much like the new generation has like kind of taken over with GH. He's like the patriarch for Charles.
Yeah, he's the show now. Everything emerges from Sonny Corinthos.
Right. The dawn of Port Charles. So like it's so crazy looking at that, and how sometimes my mom she'll be saying, "Oh, she's still on the show." Like she saw Laura. She's like, "Oh, she's still out there." I was like, "Yeah, she's still out there," because she started watching it from that era. But it's so cool to see how they can continue on and keep telling these stories in different ways. And you see the generations. Like there's just nothing like soaps on TV. I feel like everything really was birthed from soaps. Almost everything I feel like on TV.
Well, nowadays, I mean, yeah, you're right, because we always had films, we had plays. There would be one play, but you had Charles Dickens, who would write a book and it would be in the newspaper every week. That was the first kind of soap serialized thing. And so nowadays, every show you watch is a soap opera.
Yeah.
Stranger Things is a soap opera. I mean, you name it, Game of Thrones is a soap opera. All the shows have continuing stories because that's what ropes people in and that's what makes it exciting. All the Marvel television shows are continuing arc stories. So soap operas have influenced everything. And, it's amazing that we are still going. I mean, I think, when they started, Guiding Light started in 1937.
Yep.
General Hospital started in 1963. So, and for a long time, that was like, wow, one of the late starters,
Right.
I still think of The Young and the Restless as, I still think of Bold and Beautiful as a new show, and it started in, I guess, 87.
Yeah. I mean, to know that they've been going on for this much amount of time, some 60, some years. I mean, Guy Light have been on for 70 years. It would have been cool if they could have made it to 100 years, but hey, at least we got the 70 out of them. So I'm grateful enough for at least for that. But I mean, just to see that
70 years.
Is that crazy? It's just, and they've gone through like the different transitions, radio, when TV first came out, black and white, like oh my gosh.
It's funny to think about, the people who watch shows for 20 years, because you end up knowing all this history about all these people. It's like a live game, a fantasy, and you participate in it, and people could ask you could run into anyone. I was at a birthday party for someone, and I met a man I had never met. We were talking, and it was just chat. And then he was an actor, and he said, "Oh, I was on Guiding Light for 3 years." And I was like, "Oh, you were on Guiding Light for 3 years. Who were you?" And he said, "Well, I was the Spalding butler." And I said, "Which Spalding were you the butler for?" And he said, "Oh, I was Alan Spalding's butler." I was like, "Oh my God, I used to work on Guiding Light." We started talking about Ron Raines, who played Alan. Then we talked about the Spaldings in general. And he said, "Yeah, my character drugged Lizzie." And I'm thinking about little Lizzie, who was Philip's daughter and who was like, 5 years old when I was there. I was like, "You drugged little Lizzie?" And anyone who was like listening to the conversation, they would think we were crazy because we're talking about these people like we know who they are. But I immediately shared a bit of history in this, simulated universe of Springfield, USA, with this gentleman at a party, and it was like a secret handshake. Like, "Oh, I know the Spaldings. Which Alexandra were you there for? Were you for the Joan Collins, or were you there for Marge Doucet?"
Wow, that's the thing I love about soaps, is just like that connection that it has with us as viewers, because I feel like, because honestly, I'm not gonna lie, growing up, I thought I was the only person that watched soaps. I felt like it for the longest time, because I feel like, there was a time where it wasn't cool to watch soaps. It wasn't really cool, but now it's like, okay, so they're fully embraced.
Well, yeah, you have to be you.
Yeah, you gotta be you. You gotta be you, do that. So I mean, just being able to see that, the connections that maybe with the viewers, and even just me watching. I mean, because like I said, I start off with All My Children Would Like to Live. And I think All My Children, the first storyline was when GR went jumping out the window to avoid Erica, Kane, and Bianca. And One Like to Live, Evangeline had gone blind or something. There was like I don't know if you remember that storyline. Was like the tornado that came in, and then on One Life. Yeah, so it was like a tornado that came in that took out his eyesight. Yeah.
And it took her eyesight away?
Yeah, it took her eyesight away. And on GH, Nicholas's nanny kidnapped Spencer. And then I think Carly was trying to keep Nicholas's son away from him. And then there was a Metro Court storyline that came in.
Right.
Watching around that time. So I came in, I started watching soaps around, I want to say 2005, 2006. That's when I first started like being introduced. So I know that's a whole different generation time than when you first started watching them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, they all have these lives, and then you learn about all the stuff that came before. I really wish that there would be some way for people to be able to stream any time of a soap opera they wanted, because I know for years we had all the episodes since 1979, at least. Yeah. Guiding Light, World Turns, Another World, Search for Tomorrow, Edge of Night. It was all stored in a warehouse, and I just hope that they didn't just throw them all away. You know, like someone needs to digitize and preserve that history.
What do you think is holding that back? Because I've been wondering that too. How come we can't see that? Because I'm like, what else were they doing with those things?
It's the rights issues, because you've got to pay all the actors, residuals. You've got to pay the writers and the directors, and none of those soap operas have offices any longer. There's no paperwork to know,
right.
Which is really sad, because it's a lot of material that's lost. There's no Search for Tomorrow production office anymore.
Yeah. Wow. And that is a bummer, because I feel like there's just so much of that, and it's just sitting somewhere. And it would be cool if us as viewers can have access to that in some type of capacity, just be able to see all that material that they did in the past.
It's interesting because in the United Kingdom, they've had soap operas since like the oldest one started in 1960, Coronation Street.
Yeah.
And they have all the episodes of that, and they've repeated a lot of the episodes throughout the years. So collectors have those episodes, and they sort of, upload them or trade them from time to time. So you could find full long periods of 1978 soap operas from England. But in America, until SoapNet, there was no real repeat way to do it, And also the fact that our shows are an hour is a lot. It's a commitment. In England, the shows are a half hour, so it's easier to sort of watch a half hour.
Yeah, I noticed that in other countries, their soaps are always, because I watch a lot of South African soaps, and I've seen EastEnders, I want to say back when I was around 10 or 11. So I did see some little bit of EastEnders. I don't remember none of the characters. So don't ask me. I don't remember none of their names or anything.
Yeah.
But I did notice that other countries, their soaps are half an hour. I do think that is easier with, how they do it over there and the formatting and stuff like that.
I think that is true. I think that's why Bold and the Beautiful is so successful in overseas sales, because it's an easy show to put on, and people, like to dip in for a little while. An hour-long show, I think, is harder, because you have to really sit down for your hour.
Gotta sit down for it all. Now, Phideaux, I definitely want to pick your brain. I won't keep you too long. I just have one final question, because I definitely want to have you back whenever I get the chance, because it's been amazing just talking to you, just amazing. I just have one more question I want to ask is, what is it, would you say, that us as viewers, without obviously giving too much away, obviously, I'm not going to give anything away, but what can we expect from upcoming GH? Because I know everyone's watching, child's going to want to know that. That you
upcoming
can say.
GH.
Yes, that you can say, that you can speak on, without giving too much.
I think upcoming GH is going to be very exciting. There's an upcoming storyline that I'm enjoying. And I would just say, be really careful. Don't drink the lemonade.
Okay.
Unless you're absolutely sure that it's the lemonade, that you prepared the lemonade yourself. That's one thing. Be careful about drinking the lemonade. And also, I would be very wary about being alone at a party.
Okay. All right. So don't drink the lemonade and be really worried about being alone at a party. Okay.
Yeah. Don't wander off if you're going to go to a party.
Okay.
It's not going to be good. And let me see, what else can I tell you? There will be some, I think some sad, I'm enjoying it. I think it's going to be good, but that's the biggest news.
Okay. All right. Got that. I'm gonna keep a note of that. Well, Phideaux, I definitely want to thank you for just coming on the channel. Like, thank you so much. I feel like you just gave us like a whole educational series on the background of soaps. I really appreciate you coming on. Definitely, I would hope to at some point in time definitely have you back on here. I think it's amazing chatting with you on here and just hearing your viewpoint. So I definitely hope at some point to have you back. But anyways, guys, this has been my interview with Phideaux Xavier, our daytime Emmy-winning General Hospital director, guys. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. This has been the Soap Sanctuary. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Thank you.